like to welcome you to today's subcommittee hearing that will focus on the recommendations made by the Government Accountability Office and the Inspectors General to improve government efficiency. We all want a federal government that serves the American people in the most effective and efficient way. Government Accountability Office and agencies Inspectors General are on the front lines in combating waste, fraud, and mismanagement within the government. Their audits and investigations are vital in uncovering and eliminating the billions of dollars of waste and mismanagement of taxpayer dollars. Through reports, recommendations, and their high-risk list, GAO serves Congress and the public by conducting oversight of how federal dollars are spent. The mission is particularly vital today as we face a federal debt approaching $19 trillion. Last year, GAO saved the taxpayers a record $74.7 billion, bringing their total to over $500 billion saved since 2003. Despite these important and impressive results, agencies consistently fail to implement roughly 20% of what GAO recommends each year. While GAO looks for waste across government, Inspectors General are uniquely positioned to focus on and work within their respective agency and play a critical role in congressional oversight. IG recommendations also have the potential to save significant taxpayer dollars, but there are 709 unimplemented recommendations at the Department of Justice alone. I recently published a report titled Federal Fumbles that described 100 examples of wasteful spending and burdensome regulations, while also proposing solutions to each of these problems. I relied extensively on GAO and IG recommendations for this report and acknowledge that this report sheds light on only a small fraction of the waste that GAO and IGs identify every year. When looking at this issue, it's important to remember this is not an adversarial conversation. Creating a responsible, efficient government is something we all can and should agree on, and I find many federal employees that struggle with the waste that they clearly see every day in their agencies and look for ways and outside accountability to be able to help them solve it. It's important for Congress to take an active role and ensure that the GAO, IGs, and agencies work together to eliminate waste and mismanagement. And I look forward to this conversation today. With that, I'd like to recognize Ranking Member Heitkamp for her opening remarks. Mr. Horowitz, let me ask you a question. How do y'all share ideas? As you mentioned, SIGI is a fairly new organization. Right. So how are the Inspectors General sharing ideas? This is what we do. This has been effective. And not only methods of investigation, but places to go look and things to do that become a frequent gold mine for efficiencies within agencies.
So we've organized ourselves not only in monthly meetings to get together to talk about issues we're seeing and need to address, but we've broken down our structure by committee consistent with the kind of work we do. So there's an audit committee, an investigations committee, evaluations and inspections committee, an IT committee. Those are the committees that get together and talk about what are the auditors seeing, what are we finding, what are the agents seeing when they're doing their work. Evaluators, inspectors, same thing. On the IT side, cyber-related, what are we seeing there? They then generate proposals and ideas that the larger community then discusses on what should we jointly do. That led to our cloud computing review last year, which was a very useful and I think important review. We're undertaking one now on cyber-related issues as well, trying to think about these issues across the community. But we could be doing more in this regard, and that's one of the reasons we've sought a direct appropriation for several years now, because there could be more we're doing across 72 IGs and what we're learning and seeing and sharing that, but we need to upgrade our IT systems. We need staffing to do that. We have about 20 staff total for SIGI. Many of them are detailees because we don't have the direct appropriation, which means we don't know year to year what the pass-through funding is going to be, which has been largely the mechanism we've had over the last several years. So the President's budget doesn't include money directly for us, but for the prior several years, they have divided up through 17 IGs to see if they get funding. Those that get funding, not all of them do, then pass the money through to the SIGI. We've asked for example, $6 to $7 million over the last several years, and in the pass-through process gotten $1 to $4 million. That's no way, we can't run an organization and do some of the things that make complete sense to do when we don't know how much money we're getting year to year, because we can't hire staff in that way. We can get detailees, but that means people are just coming and going, and we don't have the kind of consistency that you need to do these kind of efforts.
It just, it just kind of boggles my mind that from somebody who used to run a state agency, and when the state auditor gave me a recommendation, man, we turned heaven and earth to get it done. I mean, because we knew there was going to be political accountability and oversight committees in the state legislature. You know, we fought. I mean, we didn't always agree with what the state auditor told us, but we certainly came to terms and said, let's get this done. Let's get the review done. And so I think part of this is trying to change the dynamic of what seems to be maybe a little bit too cavalier of an attitude that, well, it's just those guys, you know, it might be a bad hearing on the Hill, but everybody will forget about it and we'll just go about our life the way we've always gone about our life. And how do we change that attitude? And I think, Colonel, I want to talk to you because I think we have, and I think Jean would agree, have seen an attitude change at DHS, at the Department of Homeland Security. What kinds of things internally did you do to really make the supervisors and everybody there aware that these are problems, we don't want to go to the Hill anymore and say we're on high risk and doing nothing about it? Let's change attitude, let's work collaboratively and cooperatively with GAO. And how can we kind of take your experience and expand on it in other agencies?
So with us at DHS, it quite frankly started with the senior-most leadership in the department, from the secretary, the deputy secretary, the general counsel, and the undersecretary for management. If you go back to each of their confirmation hearings, this type of issue was discussed at the hearings, and they all went on record and committed to helping grow and robust up the new and improved process that we had. And that cascaded down through the department. They have been tremendously supportive of my office. We are allowed to reach out and touch anyone, anywhere within the department at any time to dialogue and engage on GAO and OIG
so you
audit
think
activity.
You think the accountability point really was when it reached a level here where we're sitting across from the nominees saying, here's your audit report, what are you going to do about it?
Well, I think our leadership wanted to do the right thing and would have done it regardless, but certainly when it's on record at a confirmation hearing, and they've taken that to heart and followed through. They've cascaded it down. The Comptroller General talked about recommendations hopefully being closed within 4 years. Our goal at DHS is to close them within 2 years, 24 months. And we track and monitor that all the time, to include bi-monthly briefings to the Deputy Secretary and other senior leaders, including the Undersecretary for Management and the General Counsel.
Yeah. Not to belabor this, but Jean, that might be the point of getting that kind of information on what's open so we don't see a lapse as we transition, and make it part of that process, make it part of the expectation that when you come, you're going to take these recommendations seriously. And if you don't agree with them, then we can have that debate. But if you do agree with them, then what's the time frame? And so I think you know, having a high-profile evaluation here on these kinds of recommendations and have your priority list and having those letters is going to be useful in the transition.
Yes, there's 2 points on this. One, we've done for this committee in the past a set of questions that could be asked during nomination hearings. Senator Voinovich was involved in this before. We can dust that off and update it and provide that to you as well. This was made broadly available from this committee to all the other committees that hold the confirmation hearings on new appointees. Secondly, under the Presidential Transition Act, GAO has a responsibility to be a source of information to incoming administration. So last time in 2008, we produced a website with all the key issues that we thought by department and agency on a cross-cutting basis, priority recommendations for the incoming administration to use. That was made available to the Congress and the public all at the same time. We did that 2 days after there was a president-elect determination. So we're positioning ourselves to do the same thing next time around. Now, while I have the floor, there's one correction I need to make, and I think it's significant. The 60-day letters that we've been talking about, by law, they come to this committee, or GAO's Oversight Committee on the House and Senate, and the Appropriation Committees. They do not go, my team tells me, to the authorizing committees, as Senator Tester mentioned. So I want to correct that, my answer, but it also, I think that's an opportunity for changing the law. I think that needs to go, they need to go to the authorizing committee.
Or it should be standard practice.
Yes.
That this committee shares it with the authorizing committee.
Yes. So we'll take that and then build upon any other suggestions in our reexamination. But I think that that change should be made.
Can I ask a follow-up question as well on DHS? There's some of the high-risk areas that have come. The FEMA Disaster Relief Fund and the administrative costs. That was one of those areas that for 10 years it was 13% administrative costs to be able to run the Disaster Relief Fund. Tell me where that is and what the conversation is like and how do you resolve that? So as you're walking through, that's a big one. That's billions of dollars. How does that kind of thing get resolved?
Well, there was an audit report this year, which we responded to, and it began with our program officials and subject matter experts specifically concurring or non-concurring with each recommendation, and I believe, as I recall, they concurred with all of them. And then we've told GAO which office within FEMA or elsewhere is going to take the action, what are they going to do, and when is it going to be done. And generally speaking, when we respond to any audit report, GAO or IG, our rules of engagement, if you will, within DHS are that you have an estimated completion date, and it's generally okay to have that up to 12 months from the date the report's issued. If it's going to go beyond 12 months, we ask the program officials to provide us interim milestones, which we track and monitor. On the Disaster Relief Fund administrative costs, that was also a duplication overlap issue that came out this year in 2015. And so that's new for us in the duplication overlap, and that's a work still in progress. We could certainly get back to you with details on what is being done to address that, but I don't.
So is that an assumption that that's a 2-year project then? As you mentioned, it's 4 years that you consider it open, but for you, you really try to get this done in 2 years.
On the recommendations related to audit reports, our goal is to close them all within 24 months of issuance. On the duplication and overlap, those are not recommendations per se. We call them actions. We track and monitor those separately. Many of those actions are the same as the recommendations in the underlying supporting audit reports, but I'd have to look at those specifics.
And when you have other agencies engaged in this, and this is what Gene Dodaro was mentioning before about when it's multi-agency, it gets tougher. What happens? Give us an example of a multi-agency issue that y'all have, and how does the process work with OMB to be able to help resolve the issues where there's duplication between agencies or there's overlap there?
So I would not be able to speak to what might or may not go on at OMB. Typically, that would be handled.
I'm just talking from your side of it, what the communication you receive from OMB and how that works and how they coordinate with you.
And that communication would typically go direct to the program officials.
Okay.
Our office is not involved in that.
So you work directly with GAO and with the OIG, but
Yes.
not necessarily with OMB in implementing some of their recommendations if it's multi-agency.
That's correct. What we do that with regards to nexus to OMB is that we do track and monitor and ensure the accomplishment of the 60-day letters that are supposed to be sent to OMB and the Congress. And so we ensure that those are going in a timely manner. DHS, as you can see in the written statement, in the past, I think it was 2008, it took us, quite frankly, 18 and a half months to get a 60-day letter out. The last 2 or 3 years, we've been down to 62, 63 days. 2016 is going to be the year that, for the first time ever, we get down below that 60-day.
59 days.
Yes, sir.
Can I ask another one lingering, and Senator Portman, just jump in anytime. We're on our second round. It's a more open conversation here. But one other question just about the Fast and Furious. Mr. Horowitz, you brought that up. Obviously, that's a long, lingering issue with a lot of recommendations that are now sitting out there. What are we at, 6 years at this point on Fast and Furious? Tell me where that status is, recommendations, and the implementation of that.
So while the issues for Fast and Furious were back in the 2009-10 period, our report was 2012. So we are finishing up our follow-up review of where those recommendations remain 3 years later, so that we can decide whether they are now whether they can be closed. And we are pretty near finalizing that and getting it here to the Hill, I think, very soon. And that's one of the ways, by the way, that we prioritize. We don't internally prioritize our open recommendations. We usually issue an aging report, in essence, to this committee and to the leadership. We prioritize by doing follow-ups on the most significant issues that we have and doing a review within 2 or 3 years usually to see where that is, a more thorough follow-up review than perhaps just getting there, the paperwork, and reviewing what the department is submitting to us. We're actually out there interviewing people and talking to people.
Okay. Senator Poole.
Well, first,